All right. Good evening. So I Googled from inside Google today. I'm very excited. No reason. I just wanted to be able to say that I had done that. Hope everyone's doing well. Very excited to be here. Congratulations.
Thank you.
On an amazing book, an amazing career, an amazing service in creating a great organization, which I have a personal thanks, because I think we've talked about this before. My cousin, Janitia Rhodes, was one of the first, I think maybe even in the first class of citizen schools up in Boston.
Yasmina's
Yasmina,
daughter,
my aunt Yasmina. So for my family, let me say thank you. So tell me, in starting citizen schools, what was the problem? Why create citizen schools?
I mean, I started it really out of a sense of frustration. First, let me say to Google, thank you guys. I mean, Gautam personifies what's been so amazing about this partnership, which started in Mountain View, came to Cambridge, New York, Chicago, Research Triangle Park, and we have like 500 people like Gautam who have incredible energy, incredible passion, and they teach, robotics, they teach programming an Android phone, but they also teach. I talked to an 80-year-old guy who learned engineering at age 50 and is now one of the top engineers in the Cambridge office. He teaches the history of jazz and blues music. Wow. And kids love it. And Gautam's teaching a 6 Degrees networking course this year, and he did Shark Tank last year. And it's an amazingly creative group. So thank you so much to our host from Google for having us here. But Rich, when I started Citizen Schools 20 years ago, and the same reason I really wrote the book, which is both frustration at what seems like a broken education dialogue that was kind of broken then and is really broken now, a strong sense that we were trying a whole lot of things, working really hard to improve schools, but doing it within a box of 6 hours a day, one teacher in front of the room. Kids learn just in that time at school in a sort of traditional method. And it was clear 20 years ago that wasn't working. It was clear 20 years ago that upper income kids like me were getting a lot more. And now there's been sort of an arms race to the top in upper income communities, and kids are getting much, much, much more. The gap between upper and lower income kids has gotten much bigger, even since starting Citizen Schools. But we also have more proof that when you bring through a program like Citizen Schools the same robotics classes, the same enrichment, the same extra academic coaching, the same extra hours of mentorship to low-income kids, they'll get the same kind of results that their middle-income peers get. So that was the basic idea: bring chances to be successful, chances for kids to meet great mentors like Gautam, and chances to have more time to learn. Pretty basic stuff, and it works.
And why middle school? You could have started early childhood, elementary. You could have gone later high school. Why middle school?
Well, as some of my family members and cousins in the room know, middle school was sort of a tough time for me, and it's to the point where at one point
my son just started middle school. Please don't.
I saw that on Facebook today. Well, 4th and 5th grade were kind of tough for me too. So your son's probably got a leg up, but. It got so bad, my mom came in to meet with my teachers for like the nth time. And my French teacher turns to me after the session and says, "Your poor mom. Your poor mom."
Excellent teaching. Great teaching moment.
But so middle school was difficult for me. It's difficult for a lot of kids. It's the broken part of the American sort of education pipeline. If you look actually at the international comparisons, our kids in 4th grade are up there with South Korea and Finland and the other top countries. By 8th grade, we're a little below the middle and headed down. And I think that's because middle school kids are, first of all, pushing their parents away, so they need mentors from the outside. We don't do a good job of providing those mentors. And second of all, they're at an age where they need to experiment, and we want them to do that in a good way, a healthy way. They need to make things and get up out of their chairs and move and learn in those different ways. And too much of school is around sitting in a chair and sort of being talked to and memorizing things. And that may have worked in a 1950s era industrial economy, but it doesn't work now. And so we need to change that. And the focus of Citizen Schools in middle school feels like the last best chance to really get kids and put them on a pathway to success. And kids are old enough to do some pretty cool things. Yeah. And they can design an Android app.
You make a powerful case in the opportunity equation, available for $10 in the back, all proceeds benefiting citizen schools. You make a very powerful case for the primary driver of the achievement gap being not so much the quality of schools, but the differential investments that some families can make in early childhood education, out of school time learning, summer learning. Here in New York City, we're in the middle of a really massive expansion early childhood system. Starting Monday, we're doubling the number of after-school programs we have for middle school students. And there was a really, you can applaud for that. And it was a really big, bruising political battle to get those resources here in New York. And I think part of it, I'm sure there's a lot to it, but I think part of it is that for many folks, there's the sense somehow that after school is extra. It's nice gravy. But you make the point in the book that it's not just gravy, it's the driver. How do we make that case to the broader country, that these are not nice to haves, but these are must haves?
Yeah, well, that's what I hope the book will help to do a little bit. And before talking more about that, I want to say that this guy here is amazing, and New York's lucky to have him in the role that he's in now. But Rich grew up in Brooklyn right after Harvard. I think right after Harvard, started an amazing program called Groundworks that does after-school extended learning, college prep, a whole lot more. Became head of the Children's Aid Society, and then recently came into this great leadership role with Mayor de Blasio. But I think you're right. I mean, after school, particularly 20 years ago, and still too much today, is seen as an afterthought, sort of a nice to have. And I think, if you look at the reason for why the gap between upper and lower income kids, which when I grew up was about 2 grade levels. There's always been a gap, but it was about 2 grade levels then. Now it's 4 grade levels. The gap in college graduation rates was 40% to 6%. Now it's almost 80% to 8%. So in both cases, the gap's almost doubled. And there's no evidence that schools are more unequal. Schools are a little unequal, wealthier to lower income communities. But there's a lot of evidence that upper income families have tripled their investment in learning, from Russian math to Kumon math to robotics camp to music coaching. And all kinds of things that build social capital and build intellectual skills and give leadership opportunities to upper income kids. And that's what's created this huge gap. So I think we just need to make that clear. And we're not going to stop upper income families from doing that. And I do that for my kids, and you do that for your kids, and we're going to keep doing that. But if we're going to have sort of a shadow education system delivering incredible results to upper income kids, we need to find a way to bring that, take that out of the shadows, bring it to all kids, so that all kids have the opportunity to do similar cool things.
I think one of the sort of awesome innovations of citizen schools, I mean, besides the name, by the way, which is, I have to ask you how you came up with that name. It's like one of the best nonprofit names I've ever heard. But the idea, I think one of the things that's so powerful about it is the idea of engaging citizens in education. And I think you think about politically and how do you create a movement like this. I think one of these innovations is that this work is really driven by citizens. Yeah. You have engineers at Google who are doing this work.
That's right.
And then there is a power there in terms of making this movement move forward. I'm curious, was that sort of intentional? Did you sort of have in your mind at the beginning that one of the ways you were going to drive this work forward is by getting some of the wealthier, some of the more resourced in society into schools, or did it just sort of a happy milestone?
It was partly out of a personal desire to want to teach, but not be a full-time teacher. But I think that is something that a lot of people feel. There's a lot of people who want to connect with kids, and we're giving kids access to Google and Fidelity and other cool places, but we're also giving those engineers and those lawyers and others access to kids who have a lot of creative ideas and a lot of potential, and that's a really cool part of the program. It is, one of our goals to help with you and with Task in the room and others to lead a movement so expanded learning time becomes the new normal. And I want to introduce, maybe he can just stand up, he's in the room somewhere, my successor as CEO of Citizen Schools, who's an amazing person, Stephen Rothstein in the back. So Stephen, if you didn't meet Stephen beforehand, he's an incredibly skilled political leader. When he was a 7th grader in Brookline, He closed down his school in protesting the Vietnam War. He knows something about commerce. He built Citizens Energy as the world's first nonprofit oil company. And we're thrilled. He's now day 5 on the job, and I'm incredibly excited to support him. And he, I think, is thinking a lot about how do we accelerate our work in trying to build a movement? How do we make the political case for extended learning time? Part of it, I think, is getting powerful people from all walks of life to have empathy with poor kids. So they don't become those kids, they become our kids. And they have much more of a sense of possibility. And the other thing that holds back, I think, movement on extended learning is a sense of that's not going to work. I think there's a lot of people say, oh, that probably can't work. That's too expensive, or it just won't work. And so I think we've made a major commitment at Citizen Schools to develop top-shelf data, multi-million-dollar studies that show this works. This works as well or better than the best charter schools. This narrows and usually closes and sometimes reverses achievement gaps with middle-income kids. And so I think data, empathy through getting powerful people connected to kids, and then just persuasion. It's a long, it's a generational effort because old paradigms die slowly. And the paradigm of just school is with a teacher and for 6 hours, and you got to get kids out to work on the farm. We don't have many kids leaving school to work on the farms, but we still have a agrarian era schedule and an industrial era delivery model that we really need to move beyond. Apologies to this side of the room for having my back partly to
Okay,
you.
I'll talk to them. You talk to them.
Yeah, we'll work it out.
Can you talk more about that? You talked about the investments you've made in data. How do we know that Citizen Schools works? I mean, what do you actually measure?
So early on, we figured that people intuitively trusted that a model where kids get to make cool things with engineers and publish newspapers and do all this hands-on work. People intuitively trusted that it would build social skills and interpersonal skills and a set of things that are hard to measure, and that Citizen Schools really does build in a powerful way. But we figured people would mostly not trust that it built grades, graduation rates, and test scores. And we were starting in Massachusetts, which is lucky to have one of the best testing systems, which isn't perfect, but tends to test higher order thinking skills more than a lot of sort of simple fill-in-the-bubble tests. So we committed 10 years ago to really be measured in part by, do our kids do better on the MCAS? Do they finish high school at higher rates? Do they go into college at higher rates? And the first study we did started about 10 years ago, ended about 5 years ago, and it looked at kids just in our optional after-school program. And they erased the achievement gap on passing the MCAS in 10th grade, having been in the program in middle school. And they erased the achievement gap on finishing high school on time. So that was super exciting. And now we've evolved from an after-school program to a model where we work with schools to work with every kid in the school. So the whole school becomes a 9 or 10 hour day, and we call it expanded learning time. And we think that's really the new model for urban schools, that every kid has a 9 or 10 hour day. It's just, if you go to that school, you don't get out of school till 5. It's not an optional thing to stay or go. But it's not all sitting in a chair. And it's not all one teacher in front of the room. It's a whole second shift of educators from AmeriCorps and from places like Google that come in and really bring alive learning in the afternoon, but also all day long. And we partner with teachers in really powerful ways to team up throughout the whole day.
Just following up on that thought, I mean, you talked before about how the things you do for your own children, things I do for my children. There is a tension, perhaps, I think. My kids, the crap I take them to, the art class, the sports, all the stuff. It never ever occurs to me to ask for an evaluation of the impact of my child's basketball program on his test scores.
Right.
What is it about? It almost seems sometimes like we think that the things that our children benefit from, that we know in our hearts drive resiliency, drive teamwork skills, drive interpersonal skills, just drive joy. Sometimes I just feel like, why don't we believe poor kids deserve that?
Yeah.
Why does it always have to be? That isn't a fair question, but
yeah.
Why does it always have to be proven? Why can't we just say that poor children deserve joyful experiences out of school?
they, they do. They deserve every experience that upper income kids take for granted. And those skills are more and more provably important to moving ahead. And part of what the book gets at is that while test scores, if it's a good test, is like a little piece of what you need, it's sort of a low bar. Like that's part of it. You need that, but it's necessary, but way insufficient to be a leader in modern society. And there's a chapter in the book that's about social capital, what Robert Putnam and others have talked a lot about. Because what moved me ahead was not so much great grades. I tested fine, but I had pretty terrible grades. But I had, my father knew Gary Hart, and he introduced me to Gary Hart, and I got a job on that Senate campaign as a 19-year-old. And that was a life-changing experience for me. And it was social capital, that moves a lot of people forward. And some people assume, well, that's a lost cause. Either have it or not, based on your zip code or who your parents are, but that's not true. Social capital is absolutely something that can be imparted. And the kids that Gautam has worked with, they've learned social skills. He learned the hands up thing, but they learned that too. But they've also met him. And in 3 years, if they want an internship, through is probably a cool summer internship program, I know Boston has, New York probably has too, they got someone to call. We have many kids now who are in college who had a citizen teacher they worked with, write an essay, write a recommendation for them going to college. So it's a whole set of skills. It's the chance to be creative. One of the things that schools are, one of the biggest mismatches between what schools are doing and what kids need is schools aren't doing nearly enough to teach creativity and innovation. There's still way too much around memorizing and following rules. And in the old days, you could get a good job, middle-class job, following rules. But now, most good jobs, you have to innovate where there's no playbook. So how do you build the skills to innovate where there's no playbook? You only do that by practicing it. And if you don't practice it in school, where are you going to practice it? For upper income kids, they practice it at robotics camp. They practice it, doing, starting with little arts and crafts projects or just that music project. My daughter went to Argentina for 3.5 weeks last summer, singing, and that probably won't do anything to improve her MCAS scores, but she wrote back, she said, "Dad, I'm living the life." I'm giving out autographs. We're doing these concerts and I'm giving out autographs. And it made her feel so good about herself, and it made her more confident in talking to people, and that's a big part of success.
It's awesome. So I want to read one of my favorite quotes from your book, which I wrote down. There were a couple of great quotes, but one of my favorites is early in the book is, "How likely is it that a child will grow up to become an engineer if she has never met one?" Talk a little bit more about that. Like what the inspiration that your citizen teachers provide to the young people in the program.
Well, the sort of the motto or the goal of Citizen Schools is to help every kid discover and achieve their dreams. And there's a lot of hard work in the achieving. There's a lot of data. There's a lot of coaching on getting better at teaching. There's a lot of learning from school day faculty, and a lot of trying to continuously improve. But it also starts with just discovering your dreams. And every kid has dreams to do cool things, but they're often dreams that are drawn from a fairly small selection of career ideas that they've seen on TV or they've seen maybe around them. And one of the coolest things I think about the program is giving kids a chance to work with engineers. We have a rocket scientist who's taught like 7 times over a class called It Is Rocket Science, where kids get to launch these rockets in the backyard of their school, and they do their final wow event at the end of the semester is they're on a hookup through Skype with real astronauts from NASA, and they're calculating how to land, do a simulated landing of a rocket on the moon. And they've got to calculate how to do it amidst lunar windstorms and all these different challenges. That opens up all kinds of cool opportunities. Mm-hmm. And literally for a black girl growing up on the south side of Chicago, the chances that she's met an engineer in school or in her neighborhood are sadly low. And yet so many jobs in the future, so many middle to upper income jobs are going to be in engineering. That's just one example. And we're not a career program to push her into engineering, but we've got bunch of kids in 4 schools in Chicago, every kid in these 4 different schools that we're in, now getting a lot of chances to work with engineers, but also lawyers and architects and carpenters and a whole lot more.
Yeah, you mentioned the WOW. And has anybody here never been to see a WOW at Citizen School? If you've never, all right, so a few of you. So do yourself a favor. I don't know. Can you invite folks to come?
Absolutely.
So do yourself a favor. Just entirely awesome. So when we started groundwork, I think I see Matt Klein in the back, right? So it's Matt Klein. When we were starting groundwork, one thing we did, we actually studied the way Citizen Schools was organized, in part because you had this great, I just love the name of a WOW. You had a great marketing and ideas to get get these powerful ideas across in a way that could gather people, capture people's imaginations. And I'm just curious generally, how intentional was all of that when you were building the organization?
It was very intentional. I mean, the idea behind the WOW was not just sort of a cool word with 2 W's and an O, but the idea was to have kids do work that was high enough quality and interesting enough that it got adults to say, "Wow, I can't believe that 6th grader could do that." And that was the goal. A lot of kids put out a little mimeograph 1-page newspaper. The first WOW of Citizen Schools was me. I used to be a journalist working with 10 kids to publish a 8-page tabloid newspaper on real newsprint and with advertisements that paid for it. And that was cool. And when people saw that, when they brought that back into the school, it's like, wow, that's really cool. It's your byline's right there. And a lot of kids might do a little mock trial in the classroom where they just argue about something. Our kids go to the federal courthouse in front of Justice Breyer in one case, or in front of state and federal judges at this amazing courthouse, and they're wearing their Sunday best clothes. The jury box is filled with people like in this room right now, and their parents are there, and their teachers are there, importantly, seeing them in a whole new light. So a kid who may be a special needs student, who the teachers kind of decided, well, they're not going to be a great student, all of a sudden they do the closing argument, and the teacher sees them in a whole different way. So not every apprenticeship leads authentically to adults saying that in the most authentic way, but that's our aspiration, to have every class say, like, wow, that is really cool. And my 6th grader might not be able to do that, and I might not be able to do that. Increasingly, the kids are doing things that I definitely can't do, like program an app for an Android phone. I had a hard time erasing a
no
photo.
problem, it's easy.
I was trying to erase a photo to clear up space because my daughter had taken so many photos on my phone, and I had to get Khalif to help me do it.
Well, I have to say, wow. So that leads me to another one of my favorite quotes, and I think also relevant to your talk about your background. Our job is to catch kids doing things right. And I know that for so many children, the traditional part of the school day does not often give children a sense of an opportunity to feel like they've done something right. And I think one of the exciting things about the work of Citizen Schools and organizations like it is you give children a chance to excel in a variety of ways that they may not have, and it's an experience they can take with them. I'd love to hear if you have any sort of great stories about kids who've come through the program over the years, who you feel like the spark, the kids who are struggling in sort of the traditional school day, for whom the extended learning time of Citizen Schools help them sort of capture a love of school generally.
Yeah, and just a quick story about that idea of catching kids doing things right. The first summer of Citizen Schools, we had 60 students and about 60 volunteers teaming up to teach 20 different classes. And one of the classes was led by a police officer in Boston named Dennis Rory, who was a community police officer. And he would always show up in his blue uniform. And one day we had a picture of him in his full uniform on a pogo stick, jumping around. So he was a very joyful guy. And he said, as a community police officer, the other police officers, they kind of catch the bad guys. That's their job. My job and your job at Citizen Schools is to catch kids doing things right. And he taught this great class where kids developed a brochure around community policing. And that was their wow. And that really stuck with us since we've always tried to do that. so many stories about kids. There's one that's coming to mind right now is a student named Jonathan Edwards, no relationship to the former presidential candidate. But Jonathan was, his record, if you looked him up at school, would be special needs student, D student, D's for grades on average, probably won't finish high school in sort of 5th, 6th grade. But if you got to know him a little bit, you learn this kid loved animals. And this bat had once flown into the brick wall outside of his mother's apartment, and he had picked the bat up, put it in a shoebox, nursed the bat in his house back to health. But he never made the connection between his love of animals and veterinary care or biology or math. He took a class taught by a young doctor who'd grown up in New Orleans, followed a somewhat similar path to Jonathan to Harvard Medical School. And he taught a class called Drugs on the Brain, where kids had a chance to hold a sheep's brain, or hold a human brain in their hands, dissect a sheep's brain, put a little droplet of alcohol on it. And it was transformative for him because he all of a sudden just saw like something, and he held a boa constrictor another time. He saw a link between some of his passions and a future career. And he transitioned out of special education classes into regular education classes, and we see that happen a lot as kids who are sort of typecast as a certain kind of kid who feel like failures discover success at citizen schools. And it may not be the first apprenticeship or the second apprenticeship, but it might be the third that they feel like, wow, that was successful, and I build the muscle memory of success. And then the next time it's a little bit easier, whether it's another apprenticeship or it's a sport or it's math class.
You, of course, write and speak passionately about opportunity. This is an idea in which our country is built. The idea that where you start life should not dictate where you end life. And you also present some stark statistics that really challenge that idea. And I think it's troubling to really come to terms with the fact that although equal opportunity has never been fully true, what's troubling about the moment we live in now is that you could argue that in many ways we're not even going in the right direction. That the amount of a child's income that can be predicted by their parents' income is growing, not declining. It's fundamentally an American idea, and one that I think it's hard as citizens to come to grips with. And so I guess I would ask you, with where the country is right now, are you optimistic? Do you think we can get on the right path in making the opportunity equation real?
I think we can. I mean, I think we're seeing it more and more clearly work for a certain portion of our population. But what you say is so true, right? We're living at a time, the first time in American history, where opportunity is actually declining, not growing, where inequality is growing, not declining. We've made some progress, though we have a long way to go around inequality of race, and that gap in terms of test scores, et cetera, is half what it was at the end of World War II, but still way too big. But inequality based on income is twice as big as it was 40 years ago. And there are a lot of forces in a worldwide economy that will, make it hard. Because they if you get that extra education, your services are more in demand, they drive up income. But the thing that makes me optimistic is that there are a lot more people besides citizen schools that are doing this work. And when we started this, there were a few dozen examples of, low-income schools that were lifting kids to the performance level of high-income schools. Now there's hundreds and hundreds, maybe even a low number of thousands. We're involved in 30 of them. Where it's a whole new kind of school that's delivering extraordinary results. But the National Academies Foundation is doing amazing things. High Tech High out in California, the Met School, Expanded Ed with Task. There's some number of schools, probably 1,000, 2,000, that are delivering great results by giving low-income kids what upper-income kids take for granted. So that, I think, eventually will take hold. The second thing that makes me optimistic is it doesn't have to cost that much. It would cost about $6 billion to bring high quality, expanded learning time to every middle school in the country that's majority low income. that would reach millions of kids. It's very doable. It could be, it won't be done in the next 3 years. It can be done in the next 10 years. What New York is trying now with trying to make, extended day omnipresent, not for every kid in the school, but for a lot of the kids in the school, in every middle school over the next several years, and trying to do pre-K in a big way too, is a big experiment on sort of can we do big things. And I think that whenever the country has done big things, from the founding of the country through the civil rights movement, it's been citizens in the lead. And government ultimately follows. Particular people in government lead. You're leading and your mayor is leading. But we won't be able to do this nationally if we don't have citizens at the forefront. And that's what's so exciting to me about citizen schools, is we need Gautam and we need Khalid and we need their colleagues, along with millions more like them, demanding extra opportunity for all kids, because Google needs it. The other sad thing that I think is the other thing, last thing that makes me optimistic, is the alignment, the interest alignment between upper income power brokers and lower income kids is greater than it's ever been before. That wasn't there, I think, in the 50s and 60s. But today, McKinsey estimates that we have a 3 to 5% permanent recession imposed on our economy, lowering everyone's standard of living because of the fact that poor kids are learning at such lower levels relative to their middle and upper income peers.
Yeah. I know we're going to have some time, I think, for questions from the audience, but can I just ask one more question before we do that? I mean, you are, I think, without exaggeration, one of the leading social entrepreneurs in our country. You've built an amazing organization. Everybody's not going to quit their career and build an organization like that. So for people, not only in this audience, but out in the world, who want to contribute to making equal opportunity real for children, what did the average citizen do?
That's a great question, and there's a last chapter in the book gets into that. And some of it is advocating for government to do more and pushing government to do more and thanking government when it does what you guys are trying to do around extended day and early childhood and more. Some of it is get directly involved. So that could be, we've got a half dozen schools here in New York that Citizen Schools is working with, and we're looking for more citizen teachers to teach any number of things. It doesn't have to be rocket science. It can be whatever you're passionate about. It can be the history of blues and jazz music. But it doesn't have to be at Citizen Schools. It could be at one of the task schools. It could be through MentorNet or Big Brothers, Big Sisters. But get involved. Or in the summer, hire a student. Hire a high school student, because that can be a ladder, that creates a ladder of opportunity. If you don't have time to do one of those things, but you have a little bit of extra money, think about how much money you spend on your own kids to go to Argentina. And say, well, maybe I'm going to match that. And I'm going to still do that for my kids, but I'm going to take an equal amount and give it to Citizen Schools or give it to another organization that's providing similar things to all kids. So I think people need to get involved, and it's fun. You heard from Gautam, it's like really fun. The Citizen Schools people are awesome. You get to work with incredibly cool people. You learn a lot. And it makes life more enriching, and it makes our country and city stronger.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's open up to some questions. Do you want people to use the mics? Would you mind going to the side to the mics? It's a race, We'll get to the mic first. Oh, we have a winner. Maybe introduce yourself too.
Hi, I'm Linda Freed. I'm
Three questions. Okay.
and thank you to both of you on all counts for your visionary work and making it work. Eric, when you're talking about citizens taking the lead, what's profoundly one of the many things that is profoundly important about what you're saying is the message that all of our kids are all of our responsibility. Mm-hmm. And in my experience, not everybody gets that. Mm-hmm. And so I was wondering, and we need to, mm-hmm. obviously. The people in the room get it, clearly, because they're here. But in your experience, and for both of you, really, what are the ahas, the wows, that actually can transform one understanding to to the other?
I think, it starts with exposure. I think human beings learn through experience and relationships. And so if you only read about kids or see stuff on TV, you form a set of impressions, you maybe hear from other people, and you don't have any chance to combat those stereotypes, you don't have any chance to build empathy and build love for kids who are different from you or from a different zip code. So we need to find ways to scale up the idea of connecting people across different lines. And that is Citizen School is one model for doing that. It's not the only model, but I think it's very important. Robert Putnam talks about social capital, and to get ahead, you need your tight circles of the people you go to church with, people in your neighborhood who support you, but you also need what he calls bridging social capital to connect with the world outside. And that's true for rich people too. Like, everyone needs that sense of connection to folks beyond their core.
Yeah.
You want
Thank
to?
Well, no, I would agree. I mean, it's one of the ways in which residential and educational segregation are so pernicious, because what it does, it allows us to perpetuate the idea that those around us are other and different and separate. And if people are separate, then you have no investment in them. So I do believe that ultimately the country has to sort of take seriously the idea of the broader community. I was trained as a civil rights lawyer. I didn't practice very long, but I was theoretically a civil rights lawyer once. And I do really believe this work is an extension of that work, because ultimately what we're trying to do is to create justice for our citizens. But to do that, you have to actually believe that your neighbor is your citizen. And in a country like this, in a city like this, that can be a difficult thing. So I do believe it's a bedrock question, because how do you get people connected in a world where there are so many ways not to be connected? I think is one of the fundamental challenges for how do we bring to the light the just country that we imagine.
Well said. Hi.
Good evening. My name is Diana Breen. I'm on the board of the Cypress Hills Child Care Corporation. And Deputy Mayor, first I just want to congratulate you on an ambitious rollout of UPK. Mr. Schwarz, I was wondering if you, yes? And after school tomorrow.
I'm going to have a bunch of drinks right after this.
Mr. Schwarz, I was wondering if you had a special Citizen Schools time machine and you could go back as you were building the organization, are there anything strategically or with programming that you would have done differently?
That's a cool question. I should ask Stephen for what the answer is. And it's kind of a cool opportunity now for the organization to reinvent itself with an amazing base of support and take it to the next level. I mean, one of the things I really struggle with, and Stephen is struggling with, and we're thinking about, is how do you simultaneously build an organization and build a movement? And a lot of people, I think, in this world, a lot of social entrepreneurs think about that challenge, and you can get trapped in the challenges of building your own organization and lose sight of the movement. But you can also just talk about the movement and lose sight of the results. And I'm very proud of the results that we've delivered, and I'm very proud of the contribution we've made to a movement, but it's at the earliest stages. And I think with Richard, with Task, with a lot of the other people in this room, there's potential, and I wish I had done even more on this over the last 10 years to really push hard on getting all levels of government to really invest in expanded learning time as the necessary complement to this kind of shadow education system that's growing up in upper income communities. And it's starting to happen. I mean, Governor Cuomo and Governor Christie don't agree on that many things necessarily. They're both putting expanded learning time into their budgets. And the president is getting behind this in a few different ways. More and more school districts are starting to think about, all right, we need to scale this. And if we want to ever have a chance, a prayer of having our kids kind of catch up with their upper income neighbors, they're going to need more time, they're going to need more mentors, they're going to need more chances to kind of make things and experiment. Thank you.
Is that part of the Cypress Hills Local Development Corporation?
It's a subsidiary.
Okay, that's one of the most amazing organizations in the city. And great work.
I think so too.
So I think we probably only have time for one more, maybe. Your
I'll
question?
get John afterwards.
Hi, my name is Oscar Robles. I work for US 2020, which is an organization that was born out of citizen schools to connect 1 million STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math professionals to hands-on project-based learning for underrepresented kids in those fields. And my question is around something that I've really enjoyed reading so far in the book, Eric, is your incredible tenacity for the idea of citizen schools. I mean, here we are 20 years later after you started the idea in your basement, really. So I would love to hear a little bit about the grit that it took to keep citizen schools alive at times when it was really difficult. For social entrepreneurs like myself with US 2020, you know, we're just a year and a half out. How did you keep the vision in mind, keep the folks who are doing the work on the ground impassioned towards that vision, and be able to get it to where it's grown now here 20 years later?
Well, thanks, Oscar. And this US 2020 is a good example of citizen schools helping to sort of lead a movement and working closely with the White House and others on this to get 1 million, science, technology, engineering, and math folks out there working at citizen schools, but also working at Task and working in schools and working at Girl Scouts and all kinds of places. So that's awesome. And thank you, Oscar, for your work on that. For me, I mean, it's been a labor of love. It's really awesome seeing your baby grow up, and at every step of the way, that's been a personal kind of heart feeling I've had. On sort of hard days, I remember in the beginning, my kind of go-to plan was to go talk to a parent. And I remember the first summer was like 95 degrees. We were in a school in Dorchester. Richard, you've probably been in the school. It's actually where Yasmini went to school. And no air conditioning, school was under construction, there's broken glass all over the place. It was 98 degrees inside and outside, day after day. And I think we were making a lot of headway with the kids, but sometimes it wasn't so clear. And when I had hard days, I would go talk to some parents who would often pick up their kids at 6 at the end of the day. It was like a full day summer program. And always, even if it seemed tough to us, they were so proud and so excited. And they were so thrilled to see their kids working with engineers and working with filmmakers and working with journalists and lawyers and carpenters. And so that really fed me in a powerful way. I taught 7 apprenticeships. So I taught journalism in the beginning, but my dad's a lawyer, so I argued a lot around the dining room table and never went into law like you and like Dad, but I taught a couple mock trial classes, taught a business class, and that kept me close to the action as well. But it's been incredible, and this book, last thing I'll say before allowing you to sort of close it down for tonight, this book has been a labor of love too, because I've worked on it over the last couple of years. It was a gift to be able to finish it right as I was passing the baton to Stephen and preparing to start a new nonprofit in the higher education world. It's a gift to be able to tell the story of citizen schools, tell a little bit of my own personal story, but really tell a story about what I think is going on in the country, what's really causing this growing achievement gap. It's very different from what a lot of people think, and hopefully give people some confidence that we don't have to accept that status quo. There's actually lots of examples, Citizen Schools is a great one, of how we can come together as a country in very affordable ways to lift up opportunity for all kids. And so last plug for the book. They have a lot of them out there. Google subsidizes the price. They're only $10. You can buy them to give to friends and to family as well as take one for yourself. And there's a great local bookstore, McNally Jackson, that's here, and I'm donating all author proceeds to Citizen Schools. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you to Google for hosting, and Richard, thank you for being a great partner up here. It's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, let me just say, just to wrap up again, really do buy the book, The Opportunity Equation. Opportunity Equation. And as Eric said, proceeds do go towards citizen schools, and it's hard to imagine a better investment than the organization Citizen Schools. I want to thank you for your leadership in this work, for your dedication to our country's future, and thank you for helping to inspire all of us to be better citizens. It's an honor to be your friend, and I can't wait to see what happens next in your career. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.